You ever swipe right just for fun and end up matching with your boss? Yeah. That's how I learned God has a wicked sense of humor. It was a Wednesday night in Brooklyn, the kind that smelled like rain and regret. I was halfway through a pint of mint chocolate chip, scrolling through profiles on a dating app one had promised myself to delete months ago. You know, the usual parade of gym selfies, filtered smiles, and bios that all said the same thing. Just looking for someone real. And then I saw her. First, I thought it was a joke. The photo was classy, not the kind of thing you post on a dating app unless you're trying to look mysterious. A woman sitting by a window, sunlight spilling over her coffee cup, her lips slightly parted in thought. But I'd recognize that jawline anywhere. The world could collapse and I'd still know the way her silhouette looked against office glass. Elena Carter, my boss, CEO of Nova Advertising, the woman who terrified entire boardrooms and somehow made it look sexy. I stared at my phone for a full minute, blinking like maybe if I looked hard enough, it would morph into someone else. No, still her. Still that calm, magnetic stare that made every word of feedback feel like gospel. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the wine. Or maybe it was the tiny, self-destructive part of me that always wants to touch fire just to confirm it burns. I swiped right. And when the screen flashed, it's a match. I nearly dropped my phone into my ice cream. I laughed out loud, a startled, nervous sound that made my cat leap off the couch. This is a nightmare, I whispered, staring at her profile picture like it was a bomb about to explode. Because here's the thing. Elena didn't know I liked women. Nobody at work did. Not because I was ashamed, but because advertising was already brutal enough without being the gay art director who makes everything about rainbows. So when her first message came through, Elena, you look familiar. Should I be worried? I nearly choked on my spoon. By morning, I had convinced myself it was harmless. Maybe she'd swipe through a few chats, get bored, and never mention it again. But then she messaged again. Elena, you didn't answer my question. Harper, should I be worried? Elena, depends. Do you flirt with your boss often? I froze. My brain short-circuited. The rational part of me screamed to delete the app and move to Canada. But the other part, the part that had spent too many late nights watching her walk through the office in that fitted black dress, couldn't resist. Harper, only when she starts it. That's when I knew I was doomed. The next morning at work was a fever dream. Elena's office sat at the end of the hall, glass walls, skyline view, the kind of place that made you want to stand taller just by being near it. Normally I could handle her. Professional distance. Polite smiles. A few sarcastic remarks when she wasn't listening. But that day, every glance, every word carried an electric undertone. She called me in for a project review. I walked in trying to act normal, pretending I didn't spend half the night rereading her texts like some teenager. Morning, I said, setting my sketchpad down. Morning, she replied smoothly, not looking up. Sleep well. It was nothing. Just 2 words. But the corner of her mouth lifted like she knew exactly what she was doing. You. I stammered. I did, she said, eyes finally meeting mine. Though I kept thinking about something I saw last night. My heart thudded. She wouldn't, I thought. Not here. On the app, she continued, tapping her pen against the desk. Some very creative profiles out there. I forced a smile. Yeah, people get inventive. Some, she said, more than others. It was a warning. A game. A line drawn in invisible ink. And I stepped right over it. For the next week it was all tension. At work we were professional, focused, colleagues. After hours, we were strangers pretending not to recognize each other except for the occasional text that turned my stomach into a knot. Elena, coffee or wine? Harper, depends on the company. Elena, dangerous answer. The strange thing was I didn't feel scared. I felt alive. Every message felt like holding my breath underwater, waiting to see how long I could last before surfacing. And then she suggested meeting for real. Elena, no work talk. Just dinner. Harper, like a date? Elena, like 2 people who happen to know each other very well pretending it's not a date. I should have said no. I really should have. But I didn't. The restaurant was dimly lit. The kind of place where conversations blurred into jazz and candlelight. She arrived in a navy dress that made every thought in my head short-circuit. Elena, I greeted, standing too fast. You look different, she teased. Less intimidating? Dangerous, I said without thinking. Her laugh was low, unexpected. You're bold tonight. Maybe it's the wine. Maybe it's me. And that was the problem, it was her. Every version of her. The woman who terrified clients in boardrooms, the one who could silence an entire meeting with a single look, and now the one leaning across the table with soft eyes and something vulnerable behind them. You ever think, I asked, that some people aren't supposed to happen? She tilted her head. And yet they do. For a second the world felt like it held its breath. The clinking glasses, the quiet music, everything faded until it was just us. And that's when I realized how much trouble I was in. A week later the office felt different. Colleagues whispered that Elena was distracted. Meetings ran shorter. Her usual sharpness had softened, not by much, just enough for people to notice. Meanwhile I was a mess. Every time she said my name in a meeting, I felt it echo somewhere deeper than it should. Then came the night everything almost fell apart. A client dinner. Half the company present. I was seated 2 chairs away from Elena, pretending to care about brand analytics when she brushed her knee against mine under the table. It was barely a touch, but it set me on fire. Later, when everyone left and the city lights bled into the office glass, she found me alone by the elevator. You keep looking at me like that, she said softly, and someone will notice. Then stop giving me reasons to, I whispered. Her hand brushed mine, slow and deliberate. I don't know what this is, Harper, she said. But I can't seem to stop. Then don't, I said. Just don't stop. And she didn't. For the first time she kissed me soft, hesitant, like a secret escaping after too long. And in that single breath every fear, every boundary, every what if disappeared. It wasn't just attraction. It was relief. Like finally finding the person you've been pretending not to see your entire life. Of course, love doesn't stay secret for long. The next morning I found an email waiting in my inbox. Anonymous. How long do you think you can hide your little romance? My stomach dropped. The office suddenly felt colder. Every whisper sounded like it was about us. And when Elena called me into her office that afternoon, I knew she'd seen it too. We need to talk, she said. Her tone was professional, but her eyes, those eyes betrayed the storm inside. Someone knows, I said quietly. I know. She looked down at her hands. If this comes out, it won't just be gossip. It could destroy everything we've built here. I can handle it, I said. I don't want you to have to. Her voice cracked on the last word, and that was somehow worse than yelling. Elena, I said softly. I knew what I was getting into. No, she whispered. You didn't. You think this is about feelings, but it's about power, perception. The board. I stepped closer. Then let's stop pretending it's anything less than real. She looked up, tired, beautiful, broken, and for a moment, I thought she'd tell me to leave. Instead, she said, meet me tonight. My place. And that's when everything changed. It was raining the night I went to her apartment. Not the romantic kind of rain you see in movies, the soft drizzle that glistens under streetlights, but the heavy, relentless kind that feels like the sky is grieving with you. I stood outside her high-rise building, soaked through, clutching my phone like it held the answer to everything. One text from her. Penthouse. 9 p.m. When the elevator doors opened, I caught my reflection in the mirror, hair damp, mascara smudged, heart somewhere between terror and hope. The doors slid open again and there she was. Elena Carter, off duty, barefoot, wearing a gray sweater that slipped off one shoulder, her hair tied in a loose bun. No armor. No title. Just her. You came, she said quietly. You asked, I replied. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she stepped forward and pulled me into the kind of hug that feels like falling. No words. Just warmth. The world could have ended right there and I wouldn't have noticed. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled in a way I'd never heard before. I've spent my whole life controlling every part of my story, she said. But you're the one thing I can't seem to manage. I smiled weakly. Guess I'm bad for business. She laughed, soft, real, the kind that only came out when she forgot to be perfect. Terrible for business. And yet, that was us in 2 words. We sat by the window, city lights flickering below, silence hanging like an unspoken confession. I traced the rim of my glass, trying to find something safe to say. "What happens if they find out?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. "Then I'll protect you," she said finally. "The thing about promises is that they sound like safety until they don't." The next few weeks felt like living in two worlds. By day we were coworkers again. Professional. Focused. The mask perfectly in place. By night we were something else entirely, messy, human. Tangled in feelings we couldn't name out loud. She'd text me after meetings. "Elena, you looked beautiful when you argued with the client." "Harper, I was furious." "Elena, exactly. It was intoxicating, the secrecy, the thrill, the quiet rebellion of choosing love in a world that wouldn't allow it. But beneath the spark was a shadow I couldn't shake." Whispers started. People noticed her smile more. My name came up in conversations I wasn't part of. And then came the day HR called me in. The room smelled like coffee and anxiety. Across the table sat Melissa from HR, polite, calculated, pretending not to enjoy the tension. "Harper," she began, "we've received reports about you and Miss Carter." "Reports?" I repeated, my voice barely steady. She nodded. "We're not here to make assumptions. But given her position and your direct role under her management, it's concerning." Concerning. The word felt like a knife wrapped in politeness. "I don't know what you're implying," I said. "Of course," she replied, smiling thinly. "Just remember, perception matters." When I left that room, I felt the walls closing in. That night, I went straight to Elena's apartment. She opened the door before I even knocked twice. "They talked to you, didn't they?" she said. I nodded. "Someone's trying to out us." She paced the room, her calm unraveling. "They can't prove anything. Unless we give them a reason," I finished. She stopped, looking at me with something between love and fear. "I can't lose this company, Harper." I swallowed hard. "And I can't lose you." She closed her eyes like the choice itself was suffocating. "What do we do?" I asked. For the first time, she didn't have an answer. Days turned into weeks, and the tension became unbearable. We avoided each other in the office, barely exchanged words unless necessary. But every time our eyes met, it was like the world cracked open again. I started wondering if I'd imagined it all, the laughter, the softness, the way she said my name like it meant something. Maybe I was just another mistake she needed to forget. Then one Friday evening, after everyone left, she appeared at my desk. "Walk with me," she said. We ended up on the roof, the city humming below, the air cold enough to sting. She stood by the ledge, her silhouette framed by neon light. "I'm going to announce I'm stepping down," she said suddenly. "What?" I spun toward her. "You can't." "I can," she said firmly. "The board's been circling me for months. If they find out about us, they'll use it as an excuse to tear me apart. I'd rather leave on my own terms." "Elena, don't." Her voice cracked. "Don't make this harder." I stared at her, anger and heartbreak colliding. "You think this fixes anything? You think walking away makes us less real? It keeps you safe," she said quietly. "That's not safety," I whispered. "That's running." For a moment we just stood there, two silhouettes against the skyline, both too proud and too scared to move first. Then she stepped closer, her eyes shimmering. "You deserve a world where you don't have to hide who you love." "And what about you?" I asked. She smiled sadly. Maybe I was never built for that kind of world. When she kissed me, it wasn't desperate or passionate. It was goodbye disguised as tenderness. And that hurt more than any argument ever could. The following Monday, an internal memo went out. Elena Carter stepping down as CEO, effective immediately. The office buzzed with speculation, power plays, rumors, whispers of scandal. I sat frozen at my desk, pretending to work, my phone silent and heavy in my pocket. She didn't message me. Not that day. Not the next. By Wednesday, I realized she wasn't coming back. I found out later she'd moved to Seattle consulting for a nonprofit, of all things. It was so unlike her and yet exactly what she needed. Meanwhile, I stayed in New York, climbing my way up, pretending the nights didn't echo with her voice. Time blurred. Months passed. The world moved on. But love has a funny way of haunting you when you least expect it. It was almost a year later when I saw her again. I was at a creative conference in Chicago networking, smiling, pretending to care about digital marketing trends when I heard someone say my name. Harper. I turned around. There she was. Same eyes, same calm, but softer somehow. She looked free. Like the storm had finally passed. Elena. My voice came out as a whisper. She smiled. Didn't think I'd see you here. I could say the same. I laughed, nervous, disbelieving. You look older, she teased. Peaceful, I said. She laughed quietly, and for a moment the room melted away. Want to get coffee? She asked. It was the same question she'd sent on the app a lifetime ago. And somehow it still felt like a beginning. The cafe was quiet, tucked away on a side street where time seemed slower. We sat across from each other, steam curling between us. So, I said, stirring my latte. Seattle suits you? It does, she said. Less chaos. More space to think. To miss me? I offered playfully. Her smile faded just enough for honesty to slip through. Every day. The silence after that was full, not awkward, not painful, just real. I kept wondering, I said softly, if you ever regretted it. She looked at me. Leaving. Letting me go. Her eyes met mine steady. Every single day. But sometimes love means stepping away so the other person can grow. I shook my head. You always did make heartbreak sound noble. She laughed gently. Old habits. We sat there, two people who had burned and survived and still somehow found their way back to the same table. And in that moment I realized something. We weren't unfinished. Just paused. Elena reached across the table, her hand finding mine. You know, she said, I don't have to run anymore. Neither do I whispered. Outside the rain had stopped. The sun broke through, turning the wet streets to gold. Inside it felt like something had finally exhaled. She smiled, the kind of smile that belongs to second chances. So, coffee today, dinner tomorrow. I grinned. Depends. Are you planning to flirt with me again? Her eyes sparkled. Always. And just like that, after all the storms, all the silence, we started over. Not as boss and employee. Not as secret lovers. Just as two women who once collided by accident and decided, this time, not to let go. Later that night I walked along the river, the Chicago skyline glowing like a heartbeat. I thought about how strange life is, how it tears you apart just to teach you what matters. I used to think love had to be perfect to be worth it. But now I know it just has to be real. Elena once told me that stories like people need conflict to mean something. Maybe that's what we were, a story that needed breaking to be understood. And as the city lights flickered on the water, I felt it quiet, certain, whole. We weren't a mistake. We were a beginning that took a little longer to arrive. The next morning, I woke to sunlight spilling across my hotel sheets and a text from Elena. Elena, breakfast? Or are you still pretending not to miss me? I stared at it for a full minute before replying. Harper, depends. Are you still pretending you're not the one who started all this? Elena, guilty. 9 a.m.? Somewhere between brushing my hair and tying my boots, I realized I was smiling, that wide, stupid kind of grin you can't fake. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of what came next. The cafe she picked was small, bright, and smelled like fresh cinnamon rolls. She was already there when I arrived, reading through a notebook, her glasses perched low on her nose. God, she looked good in glasses. She glanced up and smiled. You're late. I wanted to make an entrance, I said, sitting across from her. She arched a brow. Always the drama. Learned from the best. Her laugh was quiet, warm. I missed this, she admitted. Us. The banter. The way you make everything lighter. Yeah, I said softly. I missed us too. For a moment we didn't talk, just sat there. Coffee cups between us, the hum of the morning rush fading around our silence. It wasn't awkward anymore. Felt like peace. After breakfast we walked by the lake, the air crisp and clean. She told me about her new life, consulting for nonprofits, mentoring young entrepreneurs, working fewer hours and sleeping more. It's strange, she said. For years I thought power was the only way to feel safe. But now, I just want to do work that feels like it matters. It always mattered, I said. You just used to think it had to hurt to count. She smiled. Still quoting me back to myself? Only the good parts. We stopped near the railing, wind catching her hair. She turned to me, serious now. What about you? Are you happy? I thought about it. About the late nights, the art projects, the promotions I'd chased to fill the silence she left. I'm getting there, I said honestly. Happiness isn't loud anymore. It's quiet. Like this. She nodded, eyes glistening. I like that. Over the next few months, we started seeing each other again, carefully, quietly at first. Long calls at night. Weekend visits between New York and Seattle. It wasn't the kind of love that demanded attention. It was the kind that rebuilt itself in whispers. The first time I visited her in Seattle, her apartment felt different from the one she'd had in New York. Plants everywhere. Paintings she'd done herself. A half-finished jigsaw puzzle on the table. This is you now, I said, walking around. Calm, domestic, suspiciously well-adjusted. Don't jinx it, she warned, smiling. We cooked dinner together, danced barefoot in her kitchen, and fell asleep on the couch watching bad documentaries. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't grand. It was real. And that was everything. But of course, life never lets you keep peace without a test. One afternoon, she got a call, a big corporate firm in Chicago offering her a position. Executive director. Twice the pay. Global reach. Everything she used to dream about. She told me about it over dinner, her tone steady but her eyes uncertain. It's a great opportunity, she said. But it means moving back. Starting over. Again. And? I asked. And I don't know if I want that world anymore. I don't know if I want to be that version of myself again. Then don't, I said simply. She looked at me like she couldn't quite believe I meant it. You'd be okay with that? I fell in love with you, not your resume, I said. If you want to chase something new, I'll cheer for you. If you want to stay right here and grow tomatoes on your balcony, I'll cheer for that too. Her eyes softened. You always did know how to ruin my perfectly rehearsed speeches. Perks of being an artist. She reached across the table, taking my hand. Stay with me tonight? I was hoping you'd ask. That night, lying beside her, I watched the way the moonlight touched her face. There was something different in her breathing, slower, unguarded. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't matched that night? I asked. All the time, she murmured. I think I would have spent the rest of my life convincing myself I didn't need anyone. Especially you. I smiled. You mean especially someone who makes you laugh at 2 a.m. and steals your sweaters? Exactly. She turned toward me, tracing her fingers over my wrist. But maybe fate just got tired of waiting for us to grow up. Maybe fate's an app developer with a sense of humor. She laughed softly, the sound like a secret. Whatever it was, I'm glad it happened. Me too, I thought, but didn't say it. Some feelings don't need words. Spring came fast in Seattle, cherry blossoms, gentle rain, and that hopeful kind of warmth that makes you believe in new beginnings. We started sharing spaces, weekends in one apartment, weeks in another, blurring the distance one suitcase at a time. Our friends found out eventually. Not through scandal or accident, just because we stopped hiding. When I introduced her as my girlfriend for the first time, her hand tightened around mine under the table. She smiled, that shy, quiet smile that I hadn't seen since the beginning. After the dinner, she said, You know, that's the first time anyone's ever called me that out loud. Girlfriend. I teased. She nodded. It sounded nice. I kissed her cheek. Get used to it. One evening, about 6 months later, we went hiking near Mount Rainier. It was one of those picture-perfect days, the sky ridiculously blue, the air tasting like pine and freedom. We reached the overlook just as the sun began to set, painting the mountain in gold. Elena turned to me, eyes glowing in the light. I used to think love had to be complicated, she said. That if it wasn't chaos, it wasn't real. And now? I asked. Now I think it's just choosing. Every day. Over and over. She looked nervous suddenly, pulling something from her pocket, a small silver ring, simple, elegant, nothing flashy. Before you panic, she said quickly. It's not an engagement ring. Not yet. Just a promise. That I'm not running anymore. I stared at her, heart caught somewhere between laughter and tears. You're serious? Terrifyingly. I took the ring, slipping it onto my finger. Fit perfectly. Then I promised to stay, to fight, To not delete the app that started this mess. She laughed through tears. God, we were idiots back then. Yeah, I said, smiling. But somehow we got it right. We stood there until the sky turned to stars. No grand speeches, no music cue, just two women who'd finally stopped pretending they didn't deserve happiness. A year later, we moved into a house together, small, messy, full of sunlight. I painted murals on the walls. She filled the bookshelves with business journals and poetry. Sometimes we worked side by side in silence, sometimes we argued about dishes, sometimes we danced in the kitchen for no reason at all. It wasn't perfect. It was better. On Sunday mornings, she made pancakes and burned half of them. On Tuesday nights, I'd bring home flowers from the market because she liked the smell of lavender. Ordinary moments, stitched together until they felt like forever. And every once in a while, I'd catch her looking at me, that same look from the cafe in New York, the one that started it all. I'd tease, "What?" She'd just smile and say, "Still flirting." Always. Years later, because life keeps moving. Even through love, we were back in New York for a charity gala. She was being honored for her work with women-led startups. And I was there as her very proud +1. The lights, the crowd, the glitter, it all felt surreal. When she got on stage to speak, her eyes found mine in the audience. "I used to think strength meant never needing anyone," she said into the microphone. "But the truth is, it takes more courage to love, to be seen completely without armor. I owe everything to the person who taught me that." She paused, smiling right at me. "Harper, thank you for seeing me when I couldn't." The applause rose around us, but all I heard was my heartbeat. When she stepped off the stage, I met her halfway, ignoring the cameras, and kissed her soft, sure, unapologetic. Somewhere in the back, someone cheered. And for once, we didn't care. After the gala, we walked along the East River, city lights shimmering over the water. I leaned against the railing, remembering that first night in Brooklyn, the ice cream, the swipe, the disbelief. "Funny," I said, "how a mistake can turn into a miracle." She smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "No mistake. Just timing." We watched the skyline together, the same city that once felt too big, too cold, and it felt small now, almost gentle. "Do you ever miss it?" I asked. "The chaos." "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I remember the peace that came after. And I choose that every time." I nodded. "Me too." She took my hand. "You know what I realized?" "What?" "That love isn't something that happens to you. It's something you build brick by brick, choice by choice." I smiled. "So we're builders now?" She laughed. "Apparently." And right there, under the hum of the city, we made a silent promise, not of perfection, not of forever, but of presence. To keep showing up. To keep choosing. To keep loving. Years later, when people asked how we met, we always gave the same answer: she swiped right. And then we'd laugh, because behind that simple line lived an entire universe. The heartbreak, the distance, the courage, the quiet mornings after the storm. It wasn't about luck. It wasn't even about fate. It was about two women who decided that love, no matter how messy or inconvenient, was still worth the risk. And in the end, that was enough. Because sometimes the most beautiful stories don't start with fireworks. They start with a simple swipe, a nervous laugh, and two people brave enough to say yes. When I think back on it now, the boardrooms, the coffee shops, the rooftops, and rainstorms, I don't remember the fear. I remember her smile. I remember how she said my name like it was a promise. I remember that love doesn't always come when you're ready for it, but when you need it most. And if I could go back to that night in Brooklyn, the one with the ice cream and the rain, I'd still swipe right. Every single time. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.